Hello, everyone, and welcome to an episode of the Dairy Signal where we bring to you a lot of live content, great experts from around not only the state of Wisconsin, but really the country and sometimes even international. So, thank you for tuning in. If this is by chance your first time, I encourage you to ask questions throughout if you're joining live. If you're listening in the recorded version, by all means, these experts are for you. So, if you need help getting connected or following up with questions, just let us know so we can help make and bridge that connection for you. The Dairy Signal is made possible by our national partners who help make not only the Dairy Signal, but a lot of the educational content that you see executed throughout the calendar year possible. So thank you to our national partners again for making the Dairy Signal accessible and possible throughout the year. So we appreciate you. As we dial into today's discussion, we're really leaning in on how do you optimize reproductive dairy heifers. You were a little bit at a disadvantage as far as our listeners, but Dr. Fricke and I were talking behind the scenes that this is kind of becoming that forgotten phase, that phase of life that we really can show and shine a spotlight on. And there's a lot of room for improvement in a good way. So today we're going to really lean in on what are some of those, I'm going to call them quick tips, but they're really not. They're not a just, but they're those important things that can have a long-term impact not only on the health, but the ROI of your individual operation. So I'm really excited. As a good friend of ours, Dr. Paul Fricke is joining us today. If you're not familiar with him, he's the dairy reproductive specialist at UW Wisconsin-Madison. So without further ado, Dr. Fricke, I'll turn it off to you as you're going to know this content way better than I will ever pretend to.
All right, Cassie, thank you so much. It's always a great pleasure to be invited to speak on this webinar. And so let's get right at it. As we were talking, Cassie, we're going to talk about reproduction in dairy heifers. And
Mhm.
I'll just start by making a couple comments. And that is, over the last 20 years or so, we've had tremendous success improving reproduction in lactating dairy cows,
Mhm.
uh, such that, repro isn't hardly that big of a problem anymore in the lactating dairy cows. And so we decided to focus a little bit on the dairy heifers because I do think that they're a little overlooked, and there's some things that we can do to improve them. So I'm going to start and I'm going to go through a few concepts first. So let's get this going. So this is what I want to try to get across. I want to talk a little bit about some data we have on growth and development of heifers with regard to productive and reproductive performance. I want everybody to understand the differences between lactating cows and dairy heifers. This is a big misunderstanding that I think people have with regard to protocols and things like that. And then we've been working actively on some time to eye strategies for dairy heifers that we'll talk about and we'll clean up at the end here. So, all right, with regard to heifer rearing is an expensive part of the dairy enterprise. Estimates are that it's going to cost about $2,355 to raise a heifer from a newborn calf until she enters the herd. So that's a significant cost. And if you just break down these costs, what you can see is about 46% of those costs are feed. Most of the rest of those costs are fixed. There's not a lot we can do to change those, but one of the main points I want to get across is that improving reproductive performance in heifers can increase or decrease total days on feed and decrease total feed costs. So that's how we improve. That's how we make money better raising heifers. We are more efficient at raising them. We grow them to the right percent mature body weight, and we get them pregnant quickly.
Mhm.
Only 36% of people weigh heifers. I don't think I'm going to get on a bandwagon that everyone has to weigh them, but you at least have to kind of know where you are with these things. The targets that we talk about are not based on age so much as they are percent mature body weight.
Mhm.
So these are some targets. If I was giving a quiz at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, I would say this is going to be on the quiz. We want to breed heifers when they reach 55% of mature body weight, and we want them to be 85% of mature body weight post calving. Those are two very important benchmark numbers to think about. You need to know these numbers. You need to know the mature body weight of your herd, which you have to weigh some older animals to get that. Once you know that your percent mature body weight in your herd, then you can hit these these particular targets.
And for that post-calving weight, then, Dr. Fricke, does that kind of relate into your other segments that we've had as far as that this this 2-year-old or milking yearling in some cases is going to have tremendous growth yet in that first
Yep.
lactation. Exactly what
She's a
that is.
growing animal, and I kind of split animals into three different groups. You've got non-lactating animals, you've got first lactation, and then you got older animals. And those three groups are quite different from each other, especially from a reproductive standpoint. So good question. So I want to take you through real quickly. I may have presented this on the podcast before. I'm not sure. This is an analysis that we did, and what happened is we got a data set from a consultant from a large dairy. So this is a 7,000 cow dairy here in the Upper Midwest, and they said that they were arguing about age at first calving, and so we basically got their records and started to go through them. And the histogram you can see here is that 80% of their heifers were calving at 21 and 22 months of age. Now, that may or may not be a problem in and of itself. What it really has more to do with is what's their percent mature body weight. But I immediately looked at this and said, that's pretty early. Long-standing recommendations are probably closer to 22 or 23 months. And there's some new data suggesting that is kind of the sweet spot. So this herd was breeding heifers primarily on age, and they were trying to do what I just said. They're trying to breed heifers earlier so that they can decrease their total days on feed and decrease those rearing costs in these heifers. We had them weigh a bunch of their third and fourth lactation cows so we could figure out what the mature body weight was of this herd, and then we could calculate percent mature body weight. And then these first lactation cows were weighed at 30 days of milk, and they were grouped into quartiles based on body weight. So let's get to the data. So basically, we broke these first. Now, this is just to review. This is the body weight at 30 days in milk of first lactation cows. So they were taking all these body weights. So we split them into 4 equal groups that we call quartiles. The lowest quartile, you can see the body weight is lower than the highest quartile. So this is based on these weights, okay? And then we calculated the percent mature body weight. Remember, my target was 85% of mature body weight post-calving. And what you can see is half of these heifers were not hitting that 85% mature body weight target. So immediately we said, well, this might be a problem. The upper end were hitting the 85% mature body weight or better. So we looked at this data set and we said, what else can we do with it? One of the things we did is we were able to go in and calculate the predicted transmitting abilities. Just as an aside here, this herd was not genomically tested. We're interested in genomics. We would like to work more with genomics, but all we had were the PTAs. And so basically what you can see, and the thing that was most striking to us, is that you put these animals into these quartiles based on percent mature body weight post-calving, and genetically, these animals are very different. So the lightest heifers had the worst genetics for milk compared to the heaviest heifers. These heifers were going to be smaller based on stature compared to these, so they're lighter because genetically they're going to be lighter. They're much more efficient from a feed save standpoint. They're much better at productive life, probably because of this next thing. I'm interested in repro, so this is daughter pregnancy rate and heifer conception rate. The lightest heifers were the most fertile compared to the heaviest heifers, which actually had a negative weight for PTA for heifer conception rate. So the contrast here, Cassie, you may have heard there's an antagonism between milk production and reproduction, and that really shows itself here. So lower milk production, better fertility compared to higher milk production and worse fertility. So I looked at this and I told my grad student at the time, Megan, I said, let's look at the conception rate of the first lactation heifers when these animals were heifers. And so all of these breedings were based on estrus, and there's no synchronized breedings in this particular data set. And what you can see is these lightest heifers, and by the way, these are all bred to sex semen. So the lightest heifers with the best fertility, 72% conception rate versus 46% conception rate in the heaviest ones. So tremendous difference in fertility. That's a 25 percentage point difference. And so I started to look at this and I said, well, what's happening is the most fertile heifers are getting pregnant. So they're all inseminated too early, but the most fertile ones get pregnant at that first insemination. Now, you may think that that's a good thing, but they're bred too early. And so what that does is it locks them into that lower weight.
Hmm.
The reason that these animals got heavier is because at a lower conception rate, it takes more breedings to get them pregnant, and so more days elapse. They have more time to grow, and so that's what we saw kind of come out of this data set. It's very interesting as far as we don't know exactly how we would use this particularly to manage these heifers, but it's something you need to think about that you've got these different fertility groups of these heifers, and it's the fertility of the heifers that put them into the different weight classes. Then
Hmm.
we looked at milk production. This is just observational. And if you just look, for example, at week 8, the lightest heifer is 33.8 kilos of milk per day versus 38.4 kilos in the heaviest ones. So that's about 10 pounds of milk per heifer per day more for the heaviest heifers compared to the light heifers. Okay. So I just present this as a bit of a thought exercise, but to say that you have to raise your heifers properly to maximize milk production. So I don't know if you have any questions on that, Cassie. It's just a very interesting data set. It's actually been repeated by some of the groups. The group down at Purdue, for example, has a very similar data set to this.
I was gonna say I was brushing up on this topic before, and I saw a similar paper that was kind of filtering through some of the dairy science,
Yeah.
journal of dairy science articles that were filtering through it. My follow-up question is this is very much focused on that first lactation. Has someone followed it through to lactation 2 and 3 to see these lighter versus heavier heifers, how they carry through as far as
Yeah.
longevity wise?
That's hard to do because there's so much selection bias, as we call it, as
Sure.
these animals get older. So farmers know which their good cows are, so they'll keep them, they'll get rid
Yeah.
of the others. So we did attempt to look at that in this group, and the comment a lot of people have is that yeah, the heifers are lighter, those light ones, they'll catch up later. They never do really catch up.
Okay.
So you kind of lock them into that lower milk production state. We can't say whether that difference, the difference that I'm showing here, is that due to the percent mature body weight, or is
Mm.
that due to just the genetic component? It's probably part of both. And so
Sure.
these are some things that we need to look at going forward.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so this is kind of fun. Just want to talk about where we are in the U.S. with things. I just put together a series of graphs to kind of illustrate the situation that we're in.
Hmm.
This is the bars are the beef cow inventory in the US. So you can see beef cow inventory peaked in 2019, and since that time it's declined. We all know the story.
Okay.
Because we have declining beef cattle inventory, the red line is live cattle price. And so we're at a 65-year low, and I think that's an old number. I've heard 75-year low now.
Yes. Yep.
So it's like a 75-year low in beef cattle inventory, and beef prices are at an all-time high. So that's had knockdown effects on the dairy industry. What dairy farmers have done is they've changed their semen allocation patterns because they can capture a lot of the profit with these crossbred calves. And so
Hmm.
you can see from 2020 to 2024, we've seen a 45% decrease in use of conventional dairy semen. We've seen a concurrent 43% increase in beef on dairy semen and a 58% increase in basically sex semen use. So
Hmm.
farmers have very rapidly changed strategies, and this has had an effect on or is reflected in these prices. So I just ran out prices. These are kind of guesstimates. They're kind of averages from some of the sale barns around the upper Midwest. Holstein bull calves were back in 2020 $50 a head. Now they're pushing 1,000. Beef on dairy calves are $250 a head back in 2020. And this number here, 1750, is all over the place. It's going up and down. I think it's softened up a little bit, but these beef on dairy calves are very valuable. And because dairy farmers are putting so much beef semen into their herds, we've restricted the dairy heifer inventory. And so you can see the bars in this graph is dairy heifer inventory. We're at a 48-year low in dairy heifers. And so our price of springing heifers now is pushing that $3,000 to $4,000 range as well.
Hmm.
So a lot of these things have gotten kind of out of whack. And I guess what I would say, Cassie, is that since we are raising fewer replacement heifers, we have to be better at raising the ones that we have. And so that's
Absolutely.
another reason that we're interested in this whole area of dairy heifers, is why I think it's very important for the dairy industry.
So, quick question for you, because my brain is just jumping all over the place. When we're looking at obviously these dairy heifers, and they're another invaluable part of your business. When you're looking at and considering as far as the growth and the management, more on the tangibles, if you will, have you guys tracked all the way back to the wet phase of the calf, or are you focusing on a certain window when you talk nutrition?
Yeah, when I'm talking nutrition, this is a really good question. I mean, there's a lot of data from newborn baby calves until weaning. That's a
Mhm.
very popular period of time to do research and look at milk replacers and all that kind of stuff. The black box, as far as I'm concerned, is from weaning until calving. There's not
Okay.
as much data probably there. I think that sometimes that's the heifer that's out of sight, out of mind after she's been weaned, especially after she's pregnant. From getting that heifer pregnant until they calve is another area where I think we're losing some efficiencies. So I think that there's something to be said for taking a second look during those particular periods.
Okay.
Okay, so I want to show a data set we worked with DRMS just to look at semen allocation. I think 65% of the data in this data set is coming from these pink states here, New York, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Minnesota. And so what we were able to do is look at um, different semen types and how farmers are using them. So this is an updated data set from the years 22. So the columns are year 22, 23, 24, and 25. The rows are parity essentially. So we've got non-lactating heifers in the bottom row, first lactation cows, second lactation cows, third plus lactation cows. And then within each column, we have this is lined up as service numbers. So first, second, and third plus service. And then within each of these individual columns, we have the semen type. So we've got in red the beef on dairy, in light blue the Holstein conventional, and in this medium blue the Holstein sex. There's not a lot of crossbreeding going on in this particular data set. And the thing I want to point out, there's a lot of things I could point out in this particular data set. If you look at the heifers, that is where an awful lot of sex semen is being used.
Mhm.
And so, in fact, in 2025, I don't have the exact number. A whole lot of these heifers are getting bred to sex semen. Farmers want, using the most expensive semen on their most fertile heifers, the most genetically advanced heifers at the most fertile services. So we see that. So we're interested in sex semen, and we've done a number of different studies looking at sex semen in heifers. I
Mhm.
always challenge people, what is the conception rate of Holstein heifers bred to conventional semen? This is an old data set, but I like it because there's no sex semen breedings here.
Okay.
Because 2006 was the first year sex semen was available.
Mhm.
The average conception rate at this time was 57%. So I use that as a bit of a benchmark. I think it's a little higher now. I would say it's in the low 60s. Okay. So when I look at reproduction in heifers on a dairy herd, if they're bred with conventional semen, the benchmark in my head is the low 60% range. If it's not in that range, if it's below that, there's a problem. If it's better than that, great. Another issue with sex semen is that when you breed with sex semen, you take a bit of a reduction in conception rate. Again, a very old data set from 2008, but this is showing 80 to 83 or 84% of the fertility of conventional semen. That's where we are sex semen. We're probably at 90% now. So they have gotten better with the process and things like that, but it's still not equivalent. Okay. And so if you're going to use sex semen, we're interested in using sex semen for the best fertility that we can get from it. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so I've kind of set this story now. Let's look at some time to eye protocols in heifers. Lactating dairy cows are different than heifers. Okay, lactating dairy cows have more follicular waves. So everybody's heard about these follicular waves that take place during the cycle. In general, high producing lactating cows have about 80% two-wave cycles, about 20% three-wave cycles. If you compare that to a heifer, and if we use in a two-wave cycle, these types of protocols, like a double ovsing protocol, work extremely well. Okay. The
Mhm.
other thing about lactating dairy cows, they have lower circulating levels of progesterone, and so they ovulate pretty well to these GnRH treatments. So my point is that the GnRH based protocols work pretty well in our high producing lactating dairy cows. Heifers are different. So heifers have more rapid follicular turnover, about 50% two waves, about 40% three waves, and about 10% four or more waves. So in general, I like to just say that in heifers, the follicles are turning over faster. This is a bit more of a problem for like a standard type of an OBSYNC protocol. And not going to get lost in this data. When we challenge cows in low versus high progesterone environments, they ovulate better when you give GnRH in a low progesterone environment. So cows have lower circulating progesterone. You give them a treatment with GnRH, they have better ovulatory response. Heifers have higher progesterone during the cycle. You treat them with GnRH, they have a lower ovulatory response. So they're different and they're a bit of a challenge to synchronize. Okay. And we use different protocols. That's my whole point with that. The other thing that we can say about dairy heifers is that we've got different situations within farms. So if you're a farm that has a handful of heifers, you're going to use different strategies to breed those heifers than you're if a farm that has, 100,000 heifers. And we
Mhm.
have some of these heifer raisers that are that big. Okay. And they're using different strategies in these different kinds of industries. I want to talk about a strategy that some of these very large heifer growers across the United States are using. And we call these long-term progestin-based protocols. And what I did is I pulled some data from or some information from this Beef Reproductive Task Force. I put the website down there for anybody that's interested in looking into these protocols. But these are some of the long-term progestin-based protocols. This bottom protocol is the one I want to bring up. Melangestrol acetate, we call it MGA, is an orally active progestin. It's very cheap to feed. Okay, so you add it to the feed. Uh,
Okay.
they use MGA in beef feedlots to suppress estrus, but we can use them in synchronization protocols. And so you feed MGA for 14 days, you stop feeding it, and then 19 days later you give prostaglandin, and then a couple days later you give GnRH, and you can breed these heifers. In order for these protocols to work, you have to have lots of heifers in large pens, and they all have to have access to a headlock or feed. They have to eat this stuff every day. But the thing I'm going to point out about this, Cassie, is that there is limited data on this. This is a study by my friend Joe Dalton at the University of Idaho. Rather than use an MGA, they use just a progesterone insert like a cedar. You can do that. But I just want to point out they compared this protocol I just showed you. They
Mhm.
got 72% conception rates to that protocol. If they just gave two prostaglandins 11 days apart, it was lower at 58%. And if they just gave a prostaglandin and watched for eat and breed, it was even lower at 62%. So the point I'm making here, Cassie, is that these long-term progestin-based protocols seem to result in very high fertility in these heifers. And I have a grad student. She's down in Kansas right now working on some modifications of this kind of an approach because we're very interested in it. So I just put that out there as a as an idea. If you have the right kind of environment, you have the right kind of facilities, and you have lots of heifers, these protocols can be quite attractive.
Mhm.
If you don't have a lot of heifers, this is the standard gold standard protocol for heifers. We call it a 5-day cedar sync protocol. We give GnRH, we put the progesterone insert in. 5 days later, we pull the progesterone insert, give prostaglandin. Day 6, we give prostaglandin. And then 2 days later on day 8, we do a co-sync. Now, I've done a whole webinar, I think, for you guys too, Cassie, on
Yep.
not doing co-sync. Okay. And I get this question all the time. In lactating cow protocols, co-syncs will result in about 10% lower conception rates. So I've said, don't do co-sync. Heifers are different than cows. And so in this protocol, many, if not most heifers are in estrus early. So you're not really doing a co-sync. You're breeding at the right time in these protocols. Does that make sense? This is why, because the question is, why are we doing co-sync protocols with heifers, but you say not to do them in cows? It's because heifers are different than cows. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yep.
Um, good, good. This protocol has some issues. One of them is they don't ovulate very well to that first GnRH treatment. So data from our lab and from some other labs, you get about a quarter to maybe 40% of the heifers ovulating to that first GnRH treatment. A concept from lactating cows is that it's better for them to ovulate to that first GnRH treatment than for the cows that don't. So I'm going to show you a study where we tried to increase that response.
Okay.
The other issue is out here. About a third to a quarter of the heifers are in estrus 24 hours early. So it's not 100% time to eye protocol. You have to kind of tail chalk the heifers and then breed the group that comes in heat a day early. Okay. So I'm going to show you one experiment where we tried to do with this and an experiment where we tried to do with this. And then we'll have time for discussion. This is some work. Again, I'm not going to get lost in this. This is in heifers. You challenge heifers in a high progesterone versus a low progesterone environment with GnRH. They ovulate to GnRH better in a low progesterone environment. So here's the protocols. Very nice study done from the University of Florida. Keep your eye on this bottom protocol. This is the protocol I just showed you. It's the 5-day cedar sync protocol. They had a couple other controls that they compared it to. And the point here is that we can get decent fertility with time to eye in this protocol. Okay. So these guys had a very interesting approach. They said, what would happen if we gave prostaglandin 2 days before we started this protocol? What that will do is put them in a low progesterone environment, will increase ovulatory response to GnRH, and maybe improve things. And that's exactly what they did. They gave or didn't give prostaglandin. So you drop progesterone at the start of the protocol. They showed a dramatic increase in ovulatory response, 19% versus 86%. Very small group of heifers here that they looked at. And they showed a tendency for an improvement in fertility. So we looked at this and we said, well, we'd like to repeat this and maybe take a closer look at the ovulatory response and the fertility with this approach. So enter my PhD candidate, Whitney Brown. So Whitney's a good farm girl from Wisconsin. She loves heifers. This is the study we did in Kansas. And look at that beautiful rainbow there, Cassie. So you get to work with heifers with the rainbow and all that kind of stuff.
Good day.
Very good day. Very good day in Kansas. So the first study we did was in Wisconsin. And here's the protocol. Plus or minus PGF up front, 5-day protocol. We wanted to see whether we could increase fertility and we could change ovulatory response to G1. Okay. And so in the first part of this study, if you don't pre-treat, 32% ovulatory response to that first GnRH treatment. If you knock down progesterone by giving prostaglandin, we doubled it. So we didn't see the increase that they saw in the Santos paper, but I think this is a pretty realistic increase. And we're excited about this. We said, that's great. We get them to ovulate. In this study, however, there was no difference in fertility. Okay. Now, I sent Whitney down to Kansas the next summer because a lot of heifers are in Kansas. I think people know this. A lot of Wisconsin heifers are in Kansas. So we were able to get a lot of heifers in this study. And here's what we did. We had a 5-day protocol here. That's our control group. That's just the standard protocol. We had the prostaglandin up front. That's our one treatment. And we thought that if we could get a lot to ovulate at this first GnRH, maybe we wouldn't need that progesterone insert in the program.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that was our thought. So we had over 500 heifers in each of these treatments. And so let's walk through and see what happened. Here's the proportion of heifers inseminated before time to eye. Now, let me just go back here. Remember, I told you that a bunch of heifers come into heat a day early. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We thought that this treatment, setting them up with prostaglandin, would decrease the proportion of heifers that come into heat early. That didn't happen. What happened is if you don't have the progesterone insert in there, more heifers came into heat early.
Okay.
So, lesson number one, the CEDAR is important in these 5-day protocols in heifers. Okay. Everybody, can breathe a sigh of relief now. We didn't find that was actually a good approach. And then the heifers that in the 5-day treatment that got the progesterone inserts, about normal amount of heifers came into heat. Then we looked at fertility. And what we saw is that in the 5-day control group, 54%. Now, this is with sex semen, so that's not too bad of a conception rate in heifers with sex semen. And it was lower in these two treatments that were pre-synchronized with prostaglandin. I'll just then we split them out as to whether or not they were bred before time to eye or at time to eye. There's really no difference here. The one thing I want to bring up here, Cassie, that your audience might find interesting. This farm was inseminating heifers at time to eye with fresh heterospermic Holstein semen, sex semen. So this is something that's happening, and you'll see more and more of it, I think. They're using fresh sex semen to inseminate their heifers. Not primarily due to fertility reasons, but because you can sell a lot more straws of sex semen because you don't have to deal with the freezing, thawing, and killing all the sperm. There's a few percentage points advantage to the fresh sex semen, but I just throw that out there because I think people are going to start seeing more of this happening out there in the industry. Okay, and there was no difference in pregnancy loss. So here's the crew that was down there. So these are my two PhD students, Megan and Whitney. They had a blast down in Kansas. We basically concluded that we have to keep that progesterone insert in there for the 5-day protocols, and that the prostaglandin up front really didn't seem to be doing that much. Okay, so didn't really have much luck improving ovulatory response to improve synchrony or fertility. The one thing that we have done is we've tried to eliminate this early estrus, and we did that by leaving the progesterone insert an extra day.
Oh.
So we've got the standard kind of 5-day protocol up top here. The bottom, what we did is rather than pulling that progesterone insert at the first prostaglandin, we left it in until the second prostaglandin. Okay. We did 2 experiments. So we eliminated early estrus by leaving that device in for an extra 24 hours. And there was no effect on fertility if we were using conventional semen. So a lot of people are using kind of this modified 6-day protocol with conventional semen. Okay. But we're interested in sex semen. So my former PhD student, Megan Lauber, did this study with sex semen here in Wisconsin. And here's how we did this. We had a group of heifers that just got prostaglandin when they got moved into the breeding pen, watch for heat and breed. That would be typical heifer management. We had a 5-day protocol up front, or we had this 6-day protocol, and all heifers were inseminated with sex semen.
Okay.
So again, when you leave the CEDAR in for an extra 24 hours, you virtually eliminate the early estrus, which is what we were trying to do. But with sex semen, we also saw a 7 percentage point decrease in fertility. So another main point, Cassie, if we want to do main points, I think farmers are trying to use sex semen the same way they use conventional semen, and they're 2 different things. What we ended up thinking in this program is that by leaving the insert in for an extra day, we ended up breeding too early relative to ovulation. And that's a bad thing to do with sex semen. Okay. We looked at days survival to first AI. When you do timed AI, you get semen into them faster. You get them pregnant faster. In fact, on average, you're getting them pregnant about 10 days sooner. And 10 days doesn't sound like a lot. But when you do the math and you compare, I'm going to compare this 5-day treatment with the estrus group, a lot more hormones to do that 5-day protocol compared to just giving a treatment of prostaglandin. But the thing that you save is days on feed.
Yes.
And the 10 days difference makes a big difference. It ended up being $16.66 per pregnancy more profitable by being more aggressive up front. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We did a sensitivity analysis. All this says is the more expensive your feed cost, the more you have to gain by being more effective. Okay.
Makes
So
sense.
feed
Yeah.
costs are high, actually feed costs aren't too bad right now. But if in the case that feed costs are very high, you've got a lot more to make by
Mhm.
saving days on feed with your heifers.
Right. Feed costs aren't too bad as long as you're putting up your own feed.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yes.
So we concluded from this that, these being more aggressive with these protocols, uh, it pays for itself. Okay. So if I can put together a strategy, you want to grow heifers properly and get them to that 85 or 55% of mature body weight as quickly as you can.
Hmm.
Once they hit that, you want to be aggressive with your reproductive management program. And a good way to do that is to set them up front with, say, a 5 or a 6-day cedar sync protocol, as I've shown you.
Hmm.
The last little tidbit I'm going to show, and then I'll be done. This guy right here, Stephen Butler, he's at in Ireland at Moore Park. I think you've been down there, Cassie. I think you guys have done some tours down there.
Yes. Yes. We had an international trip out there. Great people.
Exactly. Great people. And I got to spend the first 6 months of 2014 there on sabbatical with Dr. Butler.
Fun.
And so I know Stephen and had a blast there, and we did a couple experiments. He took our 6-day protocol. And if you remember what I said, we speculated that we bred them too early. By leaving that progesterone in, you push ovulation out, keep time to at the same time, you breed them too early. So he just delayed breeding by 8 hours in that 6-day protocol and basically got that 10% back, that 9% conception rate back. So the last thing I'll say here for the viewers, you've got options for doing time to in heifers. The long-term progestin-based protocols in the right situations with lots of heifers, I think work extremely well. If you have fewer heifers and you want to use these short-term progesterone-based protocols, this bottom protocol is a good one to use with sex semen.
Okay.
So 6-day protocol, delay time to AI by 8 hours, getting excellent fertility coming off of that. Okay. So take-home messages. We didn't find that pre-synchronization with prostaglandin did much in the protocols. We thought it would, but it didn't. Delaying that insert removal by 24 hours did not affect fertility with conventional semen, but it did with sex semen. And so if you use that 6-day protocol, you delay insemination by 8 hours. I think that's a really good protocol to use. So we'll leave this slide up here then as we finish up the nice heifers under the rainbow in
I
Kansas.
like
So,
it. I
yeah.
like it a lot. So, Dr. Fricke, taking this angle or taking this conversation from a different angle, if I pivot it just for a moment here, has your team or have you collaborated with folks that have looked at it from the other side, from the bull side? So when we look at like the genomics or the bull fertility, have you guys looked at the semen quality as far as then the reproductive and consumption rates?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't work in that particular area with the male side of the equation, but there are people that do.
Okay.
And certainly we have genomic assessments of male fertility,
Hmm.
and they make a difference. So there's a lot of variation among bulls, and my recommendation would be to select for bulls with good fertility for sure.
Yeah, thank
Yep.
you. Like I said, different angle, different approach. I was just curious if you were running in some of those circles or talking to some of those folks. So thank you for
We
that.
have yeah, we have people in the department that are very interested in the male side of things, and they're doing some interesting work with regard to that. So
Awesome. Well, I'll give folks a chance here to ask questions if they have them. Thank you for entertaining my random thoughts throughout the discussion here today. And you highlighted a lot of those key takeaways. But if you had to do maybe like one thing for them, for our dairy farmers to take back to their business, knowing that they're going to be all across the country, some of our international listeners as well, if they had to go back and look at their heifer program and key in on one element, where would you want them to start?
Yeah, I would want them to start by evaluating the effectiveness of their heifer growth program and then their heifer repro program, right? Again, I think the key here is to grow heifers, uh, efficiently and rapidly to achieve that target, that 55% of mature body weight. But then once they hit that target, delaying breeding only makes things worse. And there's some really interesting data that Dr. Mike Overton has now,
Mhm.
where waiting too long to breed heifers or get them pregnant is not a positive thing. There's other people that have looked at this as well. So that's the real key, is to grow them properly and then be aggressive at the breeding program. You'll decrease total days on feed and you'll be more profitable as a result. I think there's a lot of uh, of profit to be made by being more aggressive reproductively with heifers.
Absolutely. And right now we're at a time, I don't know if we've ever been at a time where we can leave money on the table, but this is definitely one of those years where every cent counts. You don't want to be tripping over tripping over dollars to pick up pennies, but this is definitely one where you can have a win-win if you tighten up.
You bet.
All right. Well, without further ado, again, Dr. Fricky, thank you for joining us. Thank you for being a great friend to the Dairy Signal and for PDP. So we appreciate all your insight and all the great work that you're doing at UW and even some of it through the hub. So again, thank you. Thank you for the great stuff you got going
You bet.
on. As we wrap up today's Dairy Signal, again to our listeners, thank you for keying in. Hopefully, you have something to take back to your business, and you'll be back here again next week for more great discussion. And if you missed it before, all of these Dairy Signals are made possible because of our great partners and sponsors that have aligned with PDP, but in truth, they've aligned with you as fellow dairy farmers and truly believe and back you up. So again, thank you to our national partners for helping making the Dairy Signal and a lot of our educational content possible. Thank you guys and have a great rest of your day.